The earlier manifestation of Congressman Colmenares regarding the developments in the Supreme Court, as well as the confirmation of our clerk of court and our secretary, it is in effect, Mr. President, the Supreme Court has made it known to us that they will refuse to honor or refuse to comply with the subpoena of this court, Mr. President.
That's correct.
And I think, Mr. President, this is a serious development. If we take it in the context of, first, we debated and discussed the issue of the TRO on the dollar accounts, saying then, I mean, a number of us felt that the Supreme Court had no jurisdiction, and we continue to assert that by way of having filed our answer or our position before the Supreme Court. So after the TRO of our subpoena, Mr. President, on the dollar accounts, we now have this, the refusal of the Supreme Court to honor or comply with the subpoena. My concern, Mr. President, is that what happens next as we go through this trial? What other orders or rulings will the Supreme Court undertake, thereby whittling away, Mr. President, the powers of this impeachment court? I don't have the answers today, Mr. President. I'm not asking for a position to be taken by the impeachment court today, Mr. President. But I think just as we deliberated and voted on the issue of whether or not to honor the TRO, I think we should deliberate and perhaps vote on the issue of whether or not we will accept the Supreme Court's refusal to comply with or honor our subpoena, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
And perhaps during a caucus we can discuss this maybe on Monday or some other time, Mr. President. But I fear, Mr. President, that unless we assert the primacy and supremacy of the impeachment court in impeachment proceedings, Mr. President, we might find ourselves in a joint venture or joint undertaking with the Supreme Court in terms of impeachment proceedings. And therefore, the sole power, Mr. President, to try and decide impeachment cases becomes fiction, Mr. President. This is my fear.
All right.
For the record, Mr. President.
Well, the chair would like to clarify, because all these things might create a wrong impression to the public mind. And to be fair to this court, to be fair to our people, and to be fair to everybody, this chair would like to humbly state for the record that the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction over the trial and decision that this Senate will make in this case. That is not indicated by the action of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the guardian of the Constitution. They know that the sovereign people of this country repose to this Senate the sole power to try and decide this case. The Supreme Court cannot decide it. What happened was that we issued a subpoena, and the internal rules of the Supreme Court, which is a co-equal, separate, independent, and coordinate department with us, says we have our own internal rules on this matter, and we do not allow our judges, justices, judges, and employees to be subpoenaed by the impeachment court. That is another matter. It does not deprive us of jurisdiction to try and decide this case. In the same manner that, if you remember, when we had the problem with when the Senate had a problem with Malacanang in connection with some investigation being conducted by this Senate in one of its committees, the palace invoked its executive privilege by preventing the members of the palace staff, including the members of the bureaucracy and the military, from testifying in that particular investigation. And it was the Supreme Court who said, yes, the executive has an executive privilege, but only up to a certain respect and in the manner they defined as to how it could be invoked. And we continued with the hearing, exercising our own jurisdiction over the matter which was the subject matter of the committee hearing at the time. That is the same situation here, isn't it? No, they're not impeding us from continuing with the trial and decision on this case. We can decide this case even without those witnesses coming from the Supreme Court, based on the evidence we have at hand. The gentleman from Iloilo.
Mr. President, considering the very sensitive nature of this issue, may I move that we discuss this in our next caucus rather than in open court, if that is in order?
Well, it was started by a member.
We know, Mr. President.
Yeah.
We do.
What is the pleasure of the House?
We can take it up, Mr. President, on Monday at 12 noon.
All right. We will. The members of the court will not discuss this any further. We will hold it under advisement, and we will discuss it in the caucus on Monday.